The sound of the slap didn't just echo through courtroom 302, it shattered the air like a gunshot. Alexander Sterling, the billionaire tech mogul who thought the world was his chessboard, stood frozen, his hand still stinging. Beneath him, clutching her swollen 8-month pregnant belly, cowered Audrey. The press gallery gasped, pens hovering over notepads. But the real shock wasn't the violence, it was the man sitting on the bench. Judge Thomas Montgomery didn't bang his gavel. He didn't call for the bailiff. He simply stood up, his face a mask of terrifying calm, and unbuttoned his robe. Alexander thought he was facing a judge. He was about to realize he was facing a father who had been waiting 20 years for this moment. Alexander Sterling checked his reflection in the tinted window of the Escalade before the driver opened the door. Perfection. Not a hair out of place, his charcoal Brioni suit tailored to a millimeter of his life, the Patek Philippe on his wrist ticking away seconds that were worth more than most people's annual salaries. At 38, Alex was the CEO of Sterling Dynamics, a defense contracting firm that had just secured a $10 billion government tender. He was untouchable. Or at least he would be once he dealt with the Audrey problem. Inside the car, the air conditioning was set to a crisp 68 degrees, but the woman sitting next to him was sweating. Audrey Sterling kept her gaze fixed on her lap, her hands resting protectively over the large mound of her stomach. She was 8 months pregnant, her ankles swollen, her face pale and drawn. She looked nothing like the vibrant art gallery curator Alex had married 3 years ago. That woman had been a trophy. This woman was a liability. "Stop fidgeting," Alex said, not looking at her. He scrolled through emails on his phone. "You look guilty." "I'm not guilty of anything, Alex," Audrey whispered, her voice raspy. "I just want to go home. Please, let's just settle this privately. I don't want the cameras." Alex laughed, a cold, sharp sound. "Privately. You filed for divorce 2 weeks before the IPO launch. You tried to humiliate me, Audrey. You wanted a war. You're getting an annihilation." He turned to her, then his eyes devoid of any warmth. "Robert has the papers ready. You admit to emotional instability due to the pregnancy hormones. You sign over full custody rights to me upon the child's birth in exchange for a generous, very generous monthly allowance. Or we go into that courtroom and Robert destroys you. He'll paint you as a hysterical, unfit mother who trapped a billionaire." Audrey bit her lip until it tasted of copper. She knew Robert Cole. He was less of a lawyer and more of a hired assassin in a suit. He had buried scandals for senators and made dead bodies disappear for oil tycoons. "I won't give up my baby," Audrey said, a rare spark of defiance igniting in her chest. "I don't care about the money. I don't care about the penthouse or the Hamptons estate. I just want my daughter, and I want away from you." Alex leaned in close, the scent of expensive sandalwood and mint overwhelming her. He gripped her wrist, his fingers digging into the soft flesh. "You have no family, Audrey. You have no money of your own. You're a frantic orphan from the Midwest who got lucky. Who do you think the judge is going to believe, the man building the country's defense systems, or the gold digger who hid her past?" Audrey flinched. That was the leverage he always held over her. Her past. She had told him she was estranged from her family, that her father was a deadbeat, and her mother gone. She had never given him names. It was safer that way. "We're here," the driver announced. Outside the Manhattan Supreme Court, a sea of paparazzi surged against the barricades. Flashbulbs erupted like lightning storms. "Smile," Alex hissed, releasing her wrist and smoothing his jacket. "Show them how unstable you are." He stepped out first, waving confidently, projecting the image of the aggrieved but strong husband dealing with a difficult wife. He reached back to help Audrey out, his grip firm, masquerading as support, while actually propelling her faster than her swollen feet could manage. "Mr. Sterling, is it true she's seeking 50 million? Audrey, are you trying to sabotage the IPO?" The questions were shouted like accusations. Audrey kept her head down, shielding her eyes. She felt the familiar panic rising, the walls closing in. She had no one. Alex had systematically cut off her friends, dismissed her colleagues, and isolated her in their triplex. They entered the courthouse, the heavy brass doors shutting out the noise of the street, replacing it with the sterile, echoing hum of the legal system. Robert Cole was waiting for them by the security checkpoint. He was a short, stout man, with eyes like polished stones. He didn't look at Audrey. He only addressed Alex. "The judge assignment came through this morning." Cole said, his voice low. "It's a substitution. Judge Harrison had a stroke last night." Alex frowned. "Who's the sub? Do we know him?" "Judge Montgomery," Cole said, flipping through his file. "New transfer to the family division, formerly criminal court in Chicago. Reputation is rigid, a black-letter law type. Doesn't take bribes, doesn't play golf with the DA." Alex waved a dismissive hand. "Everyone has a price, Robert, or a pressure point. Just do your job. Make her look crazy." Audrey froze at the name. Montgomery. Her breath hitched. It couldn't be. Montgomery was a common name. There were thousands of Montgomerys. It had been 10 years. 10 years since she ran away in the middle of the night with nothing but a backpack and a bruised cheek. 10 years since she changed her name, dyed her hair, and vowed never to look back. "Audrey," Alex snapped. "Move." She stumbled forward, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Please," she prayed, "let it be a stranger." Courtroom 302 was packed. It wasn't just a divorce hearing. It was theater. Alex had ensured that specific journalists were granted access, the ones on his payroll, the ones who would spin the narrative his way. Audrey sat at the defendant's table feeling small and exposed. Her lawyer, a court-appointed attorney named Linda, who looked overworked and under-caffeinated, patted her hand. "Don't worry," Linda whispered. "We just need to stick to the facts. You've been the primary caregiver. You have medical records of the stress. We can ask for a continuance." "No continuances," Audrey whispered back, her eyes fixed on the empty judge's bench. "I just want this over." Alex and Robert Cole sat at the plaintiff's table, looking like sharks circling a wounded seal. They were laughing softly, reviewing documents. Alex looked at Audrey and winked. It was a gesture of ownership, not affection. "All rise," the bailiff bellowed. "The Honorable Judge Thomas Montgomery presiding." The door behind the bench opened. Audrey stopped breathing. The man who walked out was older than she remembered. His hair, once jet black, was now entirely silver, swept back in a severe style. His shoulders were still broad, filling out the black robe with an imposing physicality that most judges lacked. But it was the eyes, steel grey, sharp, unyielding, that confirmed her worst nightmare. It was him. Judge Thomas Montgomery took his seat. He didn't look at the lawyers. He didn't look at the gallery. He arranged his pens, opened the file in front of him, and then slowly raised his head. His gaze swept the room, clinical and detached. It passed over Robert Cole. It passed over Alex. Then it landed on Audrey. For a second, a fraction of a second, Audrey saw a flicker in those steel eyes, a microscopic widening of the pupils, a tightening of the jaw. Then it was gone, replaced by the mask of judicial impartiality. He didn't recognize her, or he didn't care. Audrey had changed her last name back to her mother's maiden name when she ran away, then took Alex's name when she married. To him, she was Audrey Sterling. Physically, she was heavier, her hair was different, and the vibrant girl he had known was buried under layers of trauma and exhaustion. Docket number 4492, the clerk announced. Sterling versus Sterling. Motion for emergency custody and petition for divorce. Ready for the plaintiff, Your Honor. Robert Cole boomed, standing up. Ready, Linda squeaked. Judge Montgomery nodded. Mr. Cole, you filed an emergency motion. State your grounds. Cole buttoned his jacket and stepped into the center of the room. He was in his element. Your Honor, my client, Alexander Sterling, is a pillar of this community. He runs a Fortune 500 company. He provides stability. His wife, unfortunately, has suffered a severe mental break. We have affidavits from household staff stating she is erratic, paranoid, and potentially dangerous to the unborn child. We are asking for immediate sole custody to be granted to Mr. Sterling upon birth, and for Mrs. Sterling to be remanded for psychiatric evaluation. The courtroom murmured. Alex looked solemn, nodding along with the lies. Objection. Linda stood up. This is hearsay, Your Honor. Mr. Sterling fired the household staff and replaced them with his own security team weeks ago. These affidavits are coerced. Sustained, Montgomery said. His voice was a deep baritone that vibrated through the floorboards. Stick to evidence, Mr. Cole, not character assassination. Cole didn't flinch. The evidence is in her behavior, Your Honor. She fled the marital home without notice. She withdrew large sums of cash. She is a flight risk. I left because I was afraid, Audrey blurted out. Order, Montgomery said, looking at her. Counsel control your client. Audrey shrank back. The way he looked at her, it was cold. He was going to side with Alex. He was a man of power, just like Alex. Men like them stuck together. She remembered the strict rules of her childhood, the impossible standards, the punishments for speaking out of turn. Mr. Sterling, Judge Montgomery said, turning his gaze to Alex. You claim your wife is unstable. Can you provide a specific instance? Alex stood up. He didn't need a lawyer for this part. He was charming, articulate, and deadly. Your Honor, Alex said, his voice smooth. I love my wife. I truly do. But last week, she threw a vase at me because I asked her to take her prenatal vitamins. She was screaming that I was trying to poison her. She's not herself. It was a lie, a complete fabrication. He had thrown the vase. That's not true, Audrey cried, tears spilling over. You threw it. You said if I didn't sign the post-enup, you'd make sure I never saw the baby. Audrey, please, Alex said, looking at the judge with a pained expression. See, this is the hysteria I'm talking about. Judge Montgomery leaned back in his leather chair. He tented his fingers. Mrs. Sterling, you claim your husband is abusive. Yes, Audrey whispered. He controls everything. My phone, my car, my money. He locks me in the bedroom when he has guests. Do you have police reports? Montgomery asked. No, he takes my phone. The security guards won't let the police in. Medical reports. He has a private doctor, Dr. Evans. He writes what Alex tells him to write. Alex sighed, a sound of long-suffering patience. Your Honor, this is delusional. I have given this woman the world. I am trying to protect our child. Come forward, Montgomery said suddenly. The room went silent. "Both of you," the judge commanded, "approaching the bench." Alex smirked at Audrey and walked confidently to the front. Audrey struggled to stand, her back aching, and waddled slowly to the bench. They stood side by side, separated by 3 feet of air that felt charged with electricity. Judge Montgomery looked down at them. He wasn't looking at papers anymore. He was looking at their faces. "Mr. Sterling," Montgomery said softly, "you are under oath. You state unequivocally that you have never laid a hand on your wife." "Never, Your Honor," Alex said without hesitation. "I am a pacifist." Montgomery turned to Audrey. "And you, Mrs. Sterling, you state you are afraid for your safety." Audrey looked up into her father's eyes. She searched for any sign of the dad who used to read her stories before the drinking started, before the anger took over. She saw nothing. "I'm terrified," she said, her voice shaking. He told me that in this courtroom he owns the truth. He said he would crush me." Alex chuckled darkly. He leaned in, breaking protocol, invading the space between them. He turned his back slightly to the gallery, so only Audrey and the judge could see his face. The mask slipped. His eyes went dead. "Your Honor, she's performing," Alex said, his voice dropping to a menacing hiss that the court microphones barely picked up. He looked at Audrey. "Stop lying, you pathetic bitch. You're embarrassing yourself." Then Alex did the unthinkable. He was so used to getting his way, so used to the adrenaline of power, and so furious that she was still speaking that he forgot where he was. Or perhaps he thought his money made him invisible. As Audrey flinched away from his whispered insult, Alex's hand shot out. It was a backhand, quick and vicious, meant to be a corrective snap like one would discipline a dog. Crack. His knuckles connected with Audrey's cheekbone. The force knocked her off balance. She stumbled, her heavy frame twisting, and she fell hard onto her knees, crying out as she clutched her belly. The courtroom erupted. "Oh my God!" someone screamed. Flashbulbs went blindingly white. The bailiff lunged forward. Alex stood there, blinking, his hand suspended in the air. The red mist cleared and horror washed over him. He hadn't meant to do it here. She tripped, Alex stammered, looking around wildly. "I tried to catch her." He looked up at the bench, expecting the judge to be calling for order, to be banging the gavel, to be helping him clear the room. But Judge Montgomery wasn't banging a gavel. The judge was standing up, slowly. The air pressure in the room seemed to drop. The noise of the gallery faded into a dull roar as Thomas Montgomery descended from the bench. He didn't use the stairs at the side. He vaulted over the low partition of the witness stand with the agility of a man half his age. His robe billowed around him like the wings of a vengeful angel. "Judge," Alex said, stepping back, his voice trembling. "Your Honor, Montgomery didn't speak. He walked past the bailiff who had frozen in his tracks. He walked past the lawyers. He walked straight to Alex. Alex Sterling was 6'2". Thomas Montgomery was 6'4", and right now he looked 10 feet tall. Montgomery stopped inches from Alex's face. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Then Thomas reached out. He didn't strike at Alex. He grabbed him by the lapels of his $3,000 suit and lifted him off the ground, slamming him backward against the heavy oak front of the judge's bench. "You lay a hand on her again," Thomas whispered, his voice amplified by the pin-drop silence of the room. "And I will tear you apart with my bare hands." Alex gasped, his feet dangling. You can't do this. I'll have your badge. Do you know who I am?" Thomas pulled Alex closer until their noses were touching. "I don't care who you are," Thomas roared, the sound shaking the walls. "But you clearly don't know who she is." He dropped Alex, who collapsed in a heap. Thomas turned to Audrey, who was being helped up by Linda. He fell to his knees beside her, disregarding the gasp of the crowd. His steel eyes were suddenly swimming with tears. He reached out a trembling hand to touch her bruised cheek. "Audrey," he choked out. "Peanut." Audrey sobbed the childhood nickname breaking through the decade of silence. "Daddy." The word daddy hung in the air, heavy and suffocating, sucking the oxygen out of courtroom 302. For a moment, the world inside that wood-paneled room ceased to spin. The stenographer's fingers hovered trembling over her keys. The journalists in the gallery, usually vultures, fighting for the freshest scrap of meat, were rendered mute by the sheer impossibility of the scene before them. Alexander Sterling. The man who could move markets with a tweet was crumpled against the base of the judge's bench, gasping for air. His silk tie skewed his dignity, shattered. Above him stood the terrifying figure of Judge Thomas Montgomery, no longer a servant of the law, but a force of nature. And on the floor, Audrey Sterling. Audrey Montgomery wept. "Get away from her," Thomas growled. He didn't shout it. He didn't have to. The command vibrated from his chest with the low frequency of an approaching earthquake. He turned his back on Alex, dismissing the billionaire as if he were nothing more than a stain on the carpet, and refocused entirely on his daughter. "Peanut," Thomas whispered again, his voice cracking, shedding the judicial baritone that had terrified criminals for decades. His large, calloused hands hovered over her, afraid to touch, afraid she might shatter. "Don't move. Just breathe." Audrey looked up. Her vision blurred by tears and the throbbing pain in her cheek where Alex's ring had grazed the bone. The face looking down at her was a landscape of regret. The deep lines around Thomas's mouth, the silver in his hair. It was all new to her. But the eyes were the same. The same eyes that had watched her learn to ride a bike, and the same eyes that had glared with disappointment when she brought home a B-. "I didn't know," she sobbed, clutching her stomach. "I didn't know it was you. I would have run. I swear I would have run." The words struck Thomas like physical blows. She wasn't relieved to see him. She was terrified. She thought she was in trouble. Even now, after he had just defended her, the programming of her childhood, the strict discipline, the cold expectations held fast. "You're not running anywhere," Thomas said thickly, finally resting a hand gently on her shoulder. "You're safe. I've got you." "Your Honor." The screeching voice of Robert Cole broke the spell. The lawyer scrambled out from behind the plaintiff's table, his face a mottled mix of purple rage and opportunistic glee. "This is a mistrial," Cole shouted, pointing a shaking finger at the judge. "This is a gross miscarriage of justice. You are the defendant's father. You failed to disclose a familial relationship. And you just physically assaulted my client. I will have you disbarred. I will have you arrested. Alex." Sterling was pulling himself up, using the bench for support. He straightened his jacket, though the lapels were crushed. His eyes darted around the room, assessing the damage, calculating the spin. He saw the shock in the gallery. He saw the cameras. "You're finished," Alex spat, wiping a smear of blood from his lip. "You crazy old bastard. You just handed me everything. I'll own this courthouse by the time I'm done suing you." Thomas slowly stood up. He didn't look at the bailiffs. He didn't look at the cameras. He looked at Alex. "Bailiff," Thomas said. His voice was calm. terrifyingly calm. The bailiff, a burly man named Officer Miller, who had worked with Montgomery for 3 weeks and feared him more than God, stepped forward. "Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Sterling just committed aggravated assault in the presence of the court." Thomas stated his tone as dry as legal parchment. "He struck a litigant during proceedings. That is a felony. It is also direct contempt of court." "You can't be serious." Alex laughed, though the sound was brittle. "You're the father. You're biased. Anything you say is void." Thomas turned his head slowly to look at Robert Cole. "Mr. Cole, you are an officer of the court. Did you or did you not see your client strike his wife?" Cole opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at the cameras. There were dozens of witnesses. The live stream was probably already trending on Twitter. If he lied under oath with this much scrutiny, his license was gone. "My client reacted to a stressful situation," Cole stammered, sweating. "He struck her." Thomas repeated, his voice hardening. "Officer Miller, take Mr. Sterling into custody. Charge assault in the 2nd degree and criminal contempt. Remand him to the holding cells immediately. No bail until arraignment." "You can't do that," Alex screamed as Officer Miller reached for his belt. "I have a meeting with the Senate Defense Committee on Thursday. Don't you touch me." "Get your hands behind your back, sir," Miller said, his training kicking in. He didn't like Alex Sterling. Nobody in the room liked Alex Sterling right now. "This is kidnapping," Alex roared as Miller spun him around. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the room. "Robert, fix this. Call the governor." "Take him out," Thomas ordered, waving a hand. "And clear the court. Now." As Alex was frog-marched out the side door, kicking and shouting obscenities that would ruin his public image forever. Thomas turned back to the room. He looked at the press gallery. "If one photo of my daughter on the floor appears in tomorrow's papers," Thomas said, projecting his voice to the back of the room, "I will hold every single one of you in contempt and confiscate your equipment as evidence in a criminal investigation. Is that understood?" The photographers lowered their cameras instantly. They knew Judge Montgomery's reputation from Chicago. He didn't bluff. "Court is adjourned," Thomas said. He didn't return to the bench. He turned back to Audrey, who was trying to stand up with the help of her stunned lawyer, Linda. Thomas reached out, sweeping Linda aside gently but firmly. He scooped Audrey up into his arms. She was heavy with the baby, but he lifted her as if she was still 5 years old and had fallen off the swing set. "Daddy put me down," Audrey whispered, ashamed. "Everyone is looking." "Let them look," Thomas said, his jaw set like granite. "I haven't seen you in 3,652 days, Audrey. I'm not letting you go." He carried her toward the door to his chambers, kicking it open with his foot. The judge's chambers were a stark contrast to the chaotic energy of the courtroom. The room was lined with mahogany bookshelves filled with thick, leather-bound legal volumes. The air smelled of old paper lemon polish and the lingering scent of pipe tobacco, though Thomas hadn't smoked in years. Thomas lowered Audrey onto the Chesterfield sofa in the corner of the room. He grabbed a throw pillow from his armchair and placed it behind her back, his movements frantic, clumsy with adrenaline. "Water," he muttered to himself. "You need water." He went to the small kitchenette in the corner, his hands shaking so badly he could barely unscrew the cap of a bottle. He took a deep breath, forcing himself to steady his nerves. He was a judge. He was a pillar of the legal system. He could not fall apart. Not now. When he turned back, Audrey was sitting up, wiping her eyes with the sleeve of her oversized maternity dress. She looked around the room, her eyes landing on a picture frame on his desk. It was face down. Audrey stared at it. You kept it face down. Thomas walked over, handed her the water, and sat on the heavy oak coffee table in front of her. He followed her gaze to the frame. I couldn't look at it, he admitted, his voice rough. Not after the first year. It hurt too much. He reached over and flipped the frame up. It was a photo of Audrey, at 18, graduating high school, smiling, unaware that 2 weeks later she would pack a bag in the middle of the night and vanish. Why Audrey? Thomas asked. The question had burned a hole in his gut for a decade. Why did you run? Why didn't you call? I hired private investigators. I spent half my savings. They traced you to a bus station in Des Moines, and then nothing. Audrey took a sip of water, her hands trembling. The adrenaline of the courtroom was fading, replaced by a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. She looked at her father. He looked older, sadder. The terrifying giant of her childhood was gone, replaced by a man haunted by ghosts. I couldn't breathe, Dad, she whispered, after Mum died. You disappeared. You were there, but you weren't. The drinking, the yelling. If I was 5 minutes late, I was grounded for a week. If I got a B, I was worthless. You wanted me to be a lawyer, a judge, a copy of you. You choked the life out of me. Thomas flinched. He looked down at his hands. I was trying to protect you. I thought if you were perfect, the world couldn't hurt you. I was grieving. You were a tyrant, Audrey said, her voice gaining a little strength. And when I met Alex, he was so charming. He was so free. He let me do whatever I wanted. He encouraged my art. He made me feel special. She let out a bitter, dry laugh. I didn't realize I was just trading one cage for another, one controller for a different one. Thomas looked up, his eyes flashing with a dangerous light. How long, Audrey? How long has he been hurting you? Audrey touched her cheek. It was already swelling, turning a dark, angry purple. The physical stuff. Only recently, since I got pregnant. He didn't want the distraction. He wanted me to get an abortion. When I refused, he changed. But the emotional stuff, the isolation, that started years ago. He told me I was stupid, that I'd be nothing without him, that my family didn't want me. He told you I didn't want you. Thomas asked, his voice barely a whisper. He said he checked. He said you never filed a missing persons report. He said you were glad I was gone. Thomas stood up, abruptly pacing the small room. He looked like a sold lion. He lied. I filed reports in 3 states. I called the FBI. He stopped, turning to face her. I've been a judge for 20 years, Audrey. I've seen the worst of humanity. Rapists, murderers, liars. But I have never wanted to kill a man until today. Dad, stop, Audrey said, alarmed by the intensity in his eyes. You can't. You're a judge. If you do anything illegal, he wins. He has lawyers who cost more than this building. He'll destroy you. Thomas took a deep breath. He walked back to the sofa and sat down next to her, taking her hand. His thumb brushed over her knuckles. I'm not going to do anything illegal. Peanut, he said softly. I'm going to do what I do best. I'm going to use the law. I'm going to dissect his life with a scalpel until there is nothing left but the truth. But you can't be the judge, Audrey pointed out, her sharp mind, the one he had trained cutting through the emotion. Conflict of interest. You're my father. You're a witness to the assault. You have to recuse yourself. Thomas smiled, a grim, predatory expression. Oh, I'll recuse myself from the divorce case. I have to. But right now, he's in my holding cell, under my jurisdiction for the contempt charge. And until the Chief Justice reassigns the case, which won't happen until tomorrow morning. Alexander Sterling is my guest." A knock came at the door. "Enter," Thomas barked. It was Linda Audrey's lawyer. She looked disheveled and terrified. "Judge Montgomery," she squeaked. The press is swarming the building. There are satellite trucks blocking the street. And, Mr. Cole is outside. He's demanding to see his client, and he's demanding to speak to you." "Let him wait," Thomas said dismissively. "How is my daughter's medical status? Did you call the paramedics?" "Yes, sir. They are waiting in the side corridor. I didn't want to bring them in without your permission." "Send them in," Thomas said. He looked at Audrey. "We need to check the baby. That fall was hard." Audrey nodded, tears welling up again. "I'm scared, Dad." "What if—" "Don't," Thomas interrupted. "The women in our family are fighters. Your mother was a fighter. You are a fighter. And this little one—" He placed a hand gently on her belly. "She's a Montgomery. She's tough." As Linda went to fetch the paramedics, Thomas leaned in close. "Audrey, listen to me carefully. When you leave this room, you are going to go to the Mount Sinai Hospital. I have a friend there, Dr. Aris Thorne. He's the chief of obstetrics. He will put you in a private wing under a pseudonym. No one gets in. Not Alex, not the press, not even your lawyer, unless I vet her first." "But what about Alex?" Audrey asked. "He'll make bail. He always gets out." Thomas stood up, straightening his robe. He walked to the window and looked down at the street below, where the flashing lights of police cars and news vans created a kaleidoscope of chaos. "Bail is set based on flight risk and danger to the community," Thomas murmured. "Alex Sterling has a private jet. He has offshore accounts, and he just assaulted a pregnant woman in front of a Supreme Court judge." Thomas turned back, his face hard. "I'm going to make sure his bail is set so high that even God would have to take out a loan." Downstairs in the bowels of the courthouse, the holding cells were cold, smelling of stale urine and bleach. It was a place where hope went to die, usually reserved for muggers, drug dealers, and the forgotten of New York City. Today, it held a billionaire. Alex Sterling sat on the metal bench, his Brioni suit smudged with dirt from the floor, where Officer Miller had restrained him. He was shaking not from cold, but from a rage so pure it felt like it was burning his skin. He kicked the bars. Clang! "God!" Alex screamed. "I want my phone. I want my lawyer. Do you know who I am? I can buy your entire family." The guard, a bored-looking veteran named Higgins, who was 2 years away from retirement, didn't even look up from his crossword puzzle. "Quiet down, Sterling," Higgins droned. "You get your call when processing is done. Systems down. Glitch in the server." It was a lie, of course. There was no glitch, but word traveled fast in the courthouse. The judge was pissed, and when Judge Montgomery was pissed, the staff fell in line. Nobody wanted to be the guy who did a favor for the man who slapped the judge's daughter. Alex paced the small cell, 4 steps forward, 4 steps back. He replayed the moment in his head. The slap, the shock, the judge standing up, her father. How could he have missed it? Audrey never talked about her father. She said he was a nobody, a drunk. Alex had never bothered to do a deep background check on her family because they were irrelevant to him. She was just a pretty girl from the Midwest. He had underestimated her. He had underestimated the connection. And now he was in a cage. Footsteps echoed in the hallway. Sharp, clicking heels. Robert Cole appeared on the other side of the bars. He looked frazzled. His tie was loosened and he was sweating profusely. "Get me out of here, Robert!" Alex hissed, gripping the bars. Now. I want out, and I want that judge's head on a spike." Robert shook his head, looking grim. "It's not that simple, Alex. The video is everywhere. TMZ has it. CNN is running it on a loop. Billionaire CEO slaps pregnant wife. The stock dropped 12% in the last hour. The board is calling an emergency meeting." Alex felt a cold knot of fear in his stomach. "The board? They can't do anything without me. I am the company." "They're talking about a morality clause, Alex. Suspension pending investigation." "Screw the board," Alex shouted. "Focus on the legal side. The judge is her father. That's a conflict, mistrial." "We can use this." "We can," Robert agreed. "But that takes time. We have to file motions. We have to go to the appellate division. In the meantime, you are sitting in a cell charged with a violent felony. And the arraignment judge— What about the arraignment judge? Montgomery isn't doing the arraignment," Robert said. He recused himself from the bail hearing to avoid the appearance of impropriety. Smart move. But the judge taking over is Judge Hernandez. Alex frowned. "I don't know her." "I do," Robert said, wiping his forehead. "She's a former prosecutor, domestic violence specialist, and she's good friends with Montgomery. They worked together in the DA's office in Chicago years ago." Alex stared at his lawyer. The walls of the cell seemed to be closing in. "So what are you saying, Robert?" "I'm saying," Robert whispered, leaning in close to the bars, "that you need to get comfortable, because you're going to be spending the night in Rikers." Alex Sterling, the man who slept on 1,000 thread-count Egyptian cotton sheets, felt his knees give way. He slumped onto the metal bench. "Rikers. And Alex," Robert added, his voice dropping even lower. "I checked the inmate manifest. The cell block they're moving you to. It's general population. Because the VIP wing is under renovation." Alex looked up, eyes wide with terror. "Fix it," he begged, his voice breaking. "I'm trying," Robert said, checking his watch. "But Judge Montgomery filed a special request. He labeled you a high-flight risk due to your assets. He froze your passport in the system before he recused himself." "He can't do that." "He just did." Robert turned to leave. "I have to go prepare for the hearing tomorrow. Try not to talk to anyone." As Robert walked away, Alex was left alone in the silence of the dungeon. He looked at his hands, the hands that had built an empire, the hands that had slapped Audrey. For the first time in his life, Alex Sterling wasn't the predator. He was the prey. And somewhere upstairs in a leather chair, Thomas Montgomery was sharpening his knife. The VIP wing of Mount Sinai Hospital was quiet, a hushed sanctuary of beige walls and soft lighting that stood in stark contrast to the violent cacophony of the courtroom. In room 412, the only sound was the rhythmic, hypnotic whoosh-whoosh of the fetal heart monitor. Thomas Montgomery sat in a rigid plastic chair he had pulled right up to the bedside. He hadn't taken off his judicial robe until 20 minutes ago, and now in his dress shirt with the top button undone, he looked less like a titan of the law and more like a man haunting his own life. He watched Audrey sleep. The sedatives Dr. Thorne had administered were finally taking hold. Her face, usually so animated in his memories of her childhood, was pale and slack. The bruise on her cheek had bloomed into a horrific tapestry of violet and black, swelling so much it distorted her left eye. Thomas reached out his hand, hovering over her hair. He wanted to stroke her head, to soothe her like he did when she was 6 and had the flu. But he pulled back. He felt unworthy. He looked at his hands. Hands that had passed sentences on thousands of criminals. Hands that had signed the divorce papers from Audrey's mother years ago. Hands that had failed to hold his family together. "She's stable, Thomas." Dr. Aris Thorne stood in the doorway. He was a tall man with kind eyes and the weary posture of a doctor who lived in the hospital. He and Thomas had played chess together on Sundays for 15 years. Aris was the only one who knew the truth about the missing daughter. "Stable isn't safe," Thomas murmured, not looking away from Audrey. "The baby is stressed," Aris admitted, stepping into the room and checking the monitors. "The fall caused a minor placental abruption. It's small, but we need to monitor it. Her blood pressure is through the roof preeclampsia exacerbated by acute trauma. If it spikes again, we'll have to induce early. The baby is 34 weeks. She'll be fine, but she'll need NICU time." Thomas's jaw tightened until his teeth ached. "He did this. He almost killed my grandchild." "Alex Sterling." Aris checked the IV drip. "I saw the news. It's everywhere, Tom. The video has 50 million views. They're calling him the Billionaire Batterer." "Good." Thomas said, his voice cold. "Let him burn." "There's something else," Aris said, lowering his voice. He pulled a clipboard from under his arm. "When we ran the standard tox screen and blood work, we found traces of lorazepam and a high concentration of beta blockers." Thomas looked up sharply. "Audrey doesn't take medication. She's holistic. She wouldn't even take aspirin when she was a teenager." "She said she didn't take them," Aris said gravely. "She told the nurse she's been feeling groggy and confused for months. She thought it was pregnancy brain." "Thomas, if she didn't take these voluntarily..." Thomas stood up slowly. The realization hit him like a physical blow. The gaslighting, the instability Alex had claimed in court. "He was drugging her," Thomas whispered, "to make her compliant, to make her look unstable in front of witnesses." "It fits the profile," Aris noted. "Gaslighting 101. Make the victim doubt her own mind, so nobody believes her when she screams." Thomas walked to the window, looking out at the New York skyline. The city looked different tonight. It wasn't a playground of opportunity. It was a crime scene. "Keep the blood samples," Thomas commanded. "Chain of custody. Lock them in your personal safe. That's evidence of poisoning." "Already done," Aris said. "You should get some sleep, Tom." "I can't sleep," Thomas said, turning back to his daughter. "I have to make sure the monster stays in the cage." Dad. 10 miles away, the cage was very real, and it smelled of despair. Alexander Sterling was not in the VIP wing of Rikers Island. Due to the renovations, a convenient bureaucratic lie that Thomas Montgomery had likely engineered, Alex was in the intake holding tank of the C-76 building. The room was a concrete box designed for 20 men, but currently holding 40. The air was thick with the smell of unwashed bodies, stale tobacco, and fear. Alex sat in the corner, his knees pulled to his chest, trying to make himself small. His Brioni suit was ruined, stained with grime. His Patek Philippe watch had been confiscated and bagged by a property clerk who had sneered at him. "Hey, suit." Alex froze. He didn't look up. "I'm talking to you, ATM." A heavy boot nudged Alex's shin. Alex looked up. Standing over him was a man who looked like he was carved out of granite, with a spiderweb tattoo on his neck. I don't have anything," Alex stammered. "They took my wallet." The man laughed, exposing a gold tooth. "I don't want your money, man. I just want to know if it's true. You the guy who slapped the pregnant lady." The entire cell seemed to go quiet. Even the drug addicts coming down from their highs stopped moaning. In prison, There is a hierarchy. Murderers are respected. Thieves are tolerated. But men who hurt children or pregnant women, they are the bottom of the food chain. It was an accident, Alex said, his voice trembling. I tripped. That ain't what the TV said, another inmate called out from the bench. TV said you backhanded her like a pimp. The man with the tattoo squatted down. He was uncomfortably close. My sister was pregnant last year. Her boyfriend hit her. She lost the kid. Alex pressed his back against the cold cinder-block wall. Look, I can help you. When I get out, I can get you a lawyer. The best lawyer. I can get you money. The man stared at him for a long, agonizing moment. Then he spat on the floor, inches from Alex's Italian leather shoe. You ain't getting out, Richie Rich, the man whispered. Not if the guards keep looking the other way like they are right now. Alex looked toward the bars. The correction officer stationed there was deliberately studying a clipboard, his back turned to the cell. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced Alex's chest. This was Montgomery. The judge's reach extended even here. He wasn't just being punished by the law, he was being served up. Robert! Alex screamed, lunging for the bars. Guard, I need protective custody. Get me out of here. Shut up, the guard yelled, banging his baton on the bars. One more word, and you go to the hole. Alex sank to the floor, sobbing. He was Alexander Sterling. He was the CEO of Sterling Dynamics. He was supposed to be dining at Le Bernardin tonight. Instead, he spent the night with his eyes wide open, flinching at every shadow, while the reality of his new world settled in. He wasn't the master of the universe anymore. He was just inmate number 49,201. The sun rose over Manhattan, but it brought no warmth to the glass-walled conference room of Sterling Dynamics. The mood inside was funereal. On the massive screen at the head of the table, the stock ticker for SDY was a jagged red line pointing straight down. Pre-market trading showed a 20% drop. Chairman Victor Halloway, a man who had survived 3 recessions, looked pale. The Pentagon called at 5:30 a.m., he told the 12 board members seated around the mahogany table. They are invoking the moral turpitude clause. They're pausing the $10 billion missile contract. If Alex remains CEO, we lose the government deal. If we lose that, we are insolvent by Christmas. Fire him, the CFO snapped. Immediately, for cause. You can't. The doors swung open. A woman strode in the rhythm of her heels, sounding like gunshots on the marble floor. She wore a blood-red suit, tailored to lethal perfection, her blonde hair cut in a razor-sharp bob. She carried a crocodile-skin briefcase and an air of absolute, terrifying confidence. Who are you? Halloway demanded. Cassandra Vale, she said, dropping her briefcase onto the table. I am Mr. Sterling's new counsel, and if you move to oust him, he will scorch the earth. The room went silent. Cassandra Vale was known in legal circles as the Viper of Fifth Avenue. She didn't defend clients, she destroyed their accusers. Alex owns 51% of the voting shares, Cassandra said, circling the table like a shark. He has authorized me to tell you that if you attempt a removal, he will liquidate his entire position. He will flood the market. The stock won't just drop, it will vanish. You will all be left holding worthless paper. He'd bankrupt himself, Halloway sputtered. He's a man in a cage with nothing to lose. Cassandra smiled coldly. But there is another way. He takes administrative leave. I handle the PR. I handle the trial. We spin this. Spin it, the CFO scoffed. We saw the video. He slapped a pregnant woman. You saw a snippet, Cassandra countered. We are preparing a new narrative, a mentally unstable wife, postpartum aggression, and a corrupt judge with a personal vendetta who baited a businessman into a reaction. We aren't fighting a domestic abuse charge anymore, gentlemen. We are suing Judge Montgomery for judicial entrapment." Holloway stared at her. It was dirty. It was evil. But it might save the share price. "You have 48 hours, Holloway whispered. "Fix this, or we burn him." While the corporate sharks were circling in Manhattan, Thomas Montgomery was hunting in the quiet solitude of his Brooklyn brownstone. He hadn't slept. His study was buried under mountains of paper financial disclosures, tax returns, and asset lists that Alex had provided during the initial divorce discovery. To the untrained eye, Alex Sterling was just a wealthy man with complicated investments. But Thomas wasn't just a judge. He was a former prosecutor who had spent years chasing money launderers. He found the thread in a stack of international wire transfers. Aurora Holdings. It was listed as a shell company for art acquisition, supposedly for Audrey to start a gallery. But looking at the dates, the numbers didn't add up. $12 million moved through the account in 3 months, all bouncing through banks in Cyprus and Malta, before vanishing into accounts in regions under strict US sanctions. Thomas picked up his phone. He dialed a number he hadn't used in years. "FBI Financial Crimes," a gruff voice answered. "Agent Miller." "Dave," Thomas said, his voice raspy but steady. "It's Tom Montgomery. Judge, I saw the news. Is your daughter okay?" "She's safe, but Dave, I need a favor. Off the books, I'm looking at a company called Aurora Holdings, registered in the Caymans. I need you to trace the IP addresses of the transaction authorizations." "What are you looking for, Tom?" "Alex Sterling is a defense contractor," Thomas said, his eyes scanning the documents. "He builds guidance chips for missiles. I think he's been selling restricted tech to foreign entities. And Dave, looking at these incorporation papers, he put the company in Audrey's name." There was a heavy silence on the line. "He set her up," Miller breathed. "If the feds ever audited him, he planned to claim his wife was running a rogue operation." "It wasn't just a bad marriage, Dave," Thomas said, a cold fury rising in his chest. "It was a frame job. He needed a patsy for treason. I need you to dig. Find the proof." Thomas hung up. He felt sick, but the nausea was quickly replaced by resolve. His phone buzzed again. An unknown number. "This is Judge Montgomery." "Hello, Judge." The voice was smooth, feminine, and laced with venom. "This is Cassandra Vale." Thomas stiffened. "I know who you are." "Good. Then you know I don't bluff. I'm calling to let you know we are filing a motion with the Ethics Committee. We've found the records from your time in the Arizona Wellness Center, Tom. The alcoholism, the depression. We have witness statements from your old colleagues about your temper." Thomas leaned back in his chair, closing his eyes. "We're going to paint a picture," Cassandra continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. "A picture of a violent, drunk father who drove his daughter away 10 years ago and then attacked her husband in a jealous rage. If you don't drop the charges and recuse yourself permanently, I will destroy your legacy. You will die a disgraced drunk." Thomas opened his eyes. They were hard as flint. He looked at the photo of Audrey on his desk, the one he had finally turned face up. "You can try Ms. Vale," Thomas said softly. "But you should know one thing about recovering alcoholics." "And what is that?" "We've already walked through hell," Thomas said. "So bring your matches. I'm ready to burn the whole world down to save her." He hung up the phone and pulled a fresh legal pad toward him. It was time to go to war. The arraignment 3 days later was not held in a standard courtroom. Due to the security risks and the media circus camped outside, it was moved to the high-security federal wing. Judge Hernandez presided, but the room felt the heavy, invisible presence of Thomas Montgomery. Cassandra Vale stood beside Alex Sterling, who had been showered and put in a fresh suit, though he looked thinner, his eyes darting nervously. "Your Honor." Cassandra began, her voice projecting confidence she didn't fully feel. "My client pleads not guilty. We move for immediate release on recognizance. Mr. Sterling is a community leader. Mr. Sterling is a flight risk," the prosecutor cut in. But it wasn't the usual district attorney. It was a special prosecutor from the Attorney General's office. Cassandra frowned. "This is a domestic dispute. Why is the AG here?" "Because," the prosecutor said, dropping a thick file on the table with a heavy thud, "new evidence has come to light regarding Mr. Sterling's finances." The doors at the back of the courtroom opened. Thomas Montgomery walked in. He wasn't wearing his robes. He was wearing a simple suit, holding the hand of his daughter Audrey. She was in a wheelchair, holding a small bundle wrapped in pink blankets. Alex's eyes widened. "Audrey." Audrey looked at him. Her face was still bruised, but her eyes were clear. The fog of the drugs had lifted. She looked at the man who had tormented her, the man who had tried to erase her past and steal her future. "It's over, Alex," she said softly. The prosecutor continued. "Thanks to information provided by Judge Montgomery and a subsequent FBI raid on Sterling Dynamics, this morning we have uncovered a massive scheme involving illegal arms sales to sanctioned entities laundered through shell companies registered in Mrs. Sterling's name without her knowledge." Cassandra Vale froze. She looked at Alex. "You didn't tell me about the arms." "It's a lie," Alex shouted, standing up. "She's setting me up." "Her father is setting me up. We have the wire transfers, Alex," Thomas said, his voice cutting through the noise. "We have the emails, and we have your signature on the authorization forms." Judge Hernandez banged her gavel. "Mr. Sterling, in light of the new federal charges of treason and international arms trafficking, bail is denied. You are remanded to federal custody." As the marshals moved in, Alex lunged toward the railing. Audrey, tell them I did it for us. I did it for the family." Audrey looked down at the baby in her arms. Little Hope Montgomery. She looked at her father, who stood like a shield between her and the monster. "We aren't your family," Audrey said. "We never were. We were just your cover." Alex was dragged away, screaming, his legacy crumbling into dust. Cassandra Vale packed her briefcase and walked out without looking back. Thomas placed a hand on Audrey's shoulder. "Ready to go home, Peanut?" Audrey leaned her head against her father's arm. "Yeah, Dad. Let's go home." They walked out of the courthouse into the blinding flash of cameras, not as victims, but as survivors. The Sterling Empire would fall, but the Montgomery family had just begun to rebuild. So that's the story of how a billionaire thought he could buy the world, but couldn't afford the price of messing with a father's love. Alex Sterling learned the hard way that power isn't about money or contracts. It's about who shows up for you when the walls come crashing down. He had the billions, but Thomas Montgomery had something stronger, the truth and the will to protect his daughter at any cost. Justice wasn't just served in that courtroom, it was personally delivered. If this story had you on the edge of your seat, hit that like button and let us know in the comments. Do you think Alex deserved a harsher punishment? And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. We post new dramas every week. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.